Hello everyone, Miss B. Hanley here, and today I'm here to give you a spoiler-free review of the Breadwinner series. The first book is The Breadwinner by Deborah Ellis. This is the first book in the series, and there are currently 4 books that are published, and there's another book that is supposed to be published sometime this year. In the first book, we follow Parvana, who is a young Afghani girl during the time of the Taliban's takeover of the country. Her dad is a former history professor and her mother is a former journalist, and both have lost their jobs because of the Taliban's attacks. And early on in the book, I'm not giving anything away, but early on in the book, her father is arrested by the Taliban and leaves the family with no person to provide an income for them. So the only solution that Parvana and her family can see is for her to cut her hair, dress up as a boy, and go work in the marketplace to get food and money for her family. This book is really intense. The whole series, I would say, is really intense. But this book in particular, the start of the story, there's a lot that Parvana has to deal with as an 11-year-old, dressing up as a boy and going out into the marketplace and understanding all of the problems that come with the Taliban's takeover, as well as, women's rights as well, the rights of her mother and her sisters. The only other boy in her family is a child, is an infant. So he's completely unable to do anything about that. She is the only person who can go out and actually support her family. You meet a lot of amazing characters in this book. Her family, I feel like, is very real. Her friends that she makes are very real. And the lessons that she is learning, and also I feel like the lessons that she teaches the reader, are really, really important. This first book, I'd say, really, really great. Highly, highly recommend it. It is very intense. There is some violence in the story, but I would say that it is appropriate for the context, the historical context of what is actually going on in this book. The second book in the series is called Parvana's Journey. After the events of The Breadwinner, Parvana has to leave the city that she's been working in as a boy to make money for her family. And you follow her as she ventures out basically into the desert and tries to survive. The story doesn't get any more lighthearted or less intense, you could say. This actually gets more intense. There's a lot more very big concepts and issues that Parvana has to deal with in the course of this book. Life and death situations, war, bombings, starvation, hunger, and also, what she does in order to help the other people of her country. She comes across a lot of other characters who are struggling to survive, and she has to make the choice whether or not to help them or leave them behind. Even more intense, I think, than the last one. Really, really, really loved this series. It's been a long time since I've continued on from a first book to a second book, so the fact that I read the first book, continued on to the second, and then continued the rest of the series is huge for me. In the third book of the Breadwinner series, called Mud City, we stop following Parvana, and instead the focus shifts to her friend Shauzia, who is another girl who dressed up as a young boy to make money for her family in the marketplace. At this point in the series, Parvana and Shauzia are on completely different journeys, although they still are thinking about each other in the course of both of the books that I've just talked about. Shauzia is thinking about, leaving the Middle East, Afghanistan, moving to Pakistan, and then eventually trying to move to France. That's her ultimate dream, is to move to France so that she can live a life of peace. Throughout the events of Mud City, though, she does try to leave the country, even though she is getting older and is less likely to be perceived as a boy. She still attempts to dress up as a boy so she can walk freely and not be harassed by the Taliban or other like-minded individuals. Personally, this book really got me because I was following Parvana's story, and I really liked Parvana as a character, but I also really love Shauzia as a character. She has a very different mindset. She's had a lot of different life experiences than Parvana has, and I think that it makes her a really, really interesting counterpart to Parvana, and to hear her story in a whole book in the series, I think, is really powerful, especially as we move into the next book. The most recent book that has been published by Deborah Ellis is called My Name is Parvana. So this is the 4th book in the Breadwinner series, and I know there's supposed to be a 5th book coming out very soon, and I can't remember the title of it at the moment, but this book, we go back to Parvana and her current situation where she is. This book is told through flashbacks that Parvana has to where she is presently to what happened to get her to that point. And eventually both the narratives kind of collide in the climax of this book, and you realize what Parvana has gone through and what she's continuing to go through, not just with the Taliban takeover in Afghanistan, but also the American troops that have invaded Afghanistan under the belief that they're going to help the Afghani people. Parvana has to interact with some of these American soldiers, and it's really interesting to see the way that the American soldiers are characterized in this book, not just the men, but also the women soldiers. It's really, really interesting to see how Parvana reacts to them and her viewpoint on it. I really liked this book because, again, no spoilers, but we do see, I don't want to spoil it, okay, so I won't say it. But we do see the kind of the stories that come from the previous books kind of combining into this final book. And we'll see what happens in the 5th book. I'm really excited to continue Parvana's story. I really, really love the characters. Honestly, I love all of the characters in the book. But some big things about the whole series itself, it's realistic, it's about war. So there is death, there is really traumatic events, there's bombings, there's violence. It's a very, very intense series, but I absolutely love it. I love the way that the characters are written and the way that they express themselves and their interactions with the other characters. It is a very poignant book. It is a very current events book. It does give you a new perspective about what's going on in the Middle East. Something I will say about this whole series is that it is written by a woman named Deborah Ellis, who is a Canadian children's author. And, I was kind of hesitant to recommend this series because she's Canadian and not from Afghanistan. But I think that she, based on my reading of it and the research that I have done about the Taliban and the people of Afghanistan, I think that she did a really good job representing their culture and representing their voices. She is a white woman talking about something that is very, what am I trying to say? She is a white author who is talking about something that happens to people of color in the Middle East. There is an element of this is fiction. This is written by somebody. This is not necessarily written by an actual person from Afghanistan. There is something to say about it being an author who is not from Afghanistan. I do think that the story still holds up. I think that Deborah Ellis did a really good job researching the characters, researching the events that are going on in Afghanistan, and understanding the people's voices. I feel like Parvana and Shazia and the other characters in this book come through really strongly with their characters' voices and with the culture of the people there. And also, really giving kids an understanding of it's not just totally ignorant over there. People are trying to fight against ignorance and against the rights of women being taken away. So I think that there is something here to what Deborah Ellis has written in these books. I like these books. I think they're great. It was a really, really quick read. The first one, they're all really short books, but they're also really engaging and interesting and page turning, and just all these events keep happening to Parvana and Shazia and their families, and it's really intense, and it just wants you to keep reading more about what's going on with them. Really great series. I hope you pick up all 4. Obviously, we're just going to be reading the first book in class together, but if you want to read the rest of the series, I do have the rest of the books, and I highly, highly recommend that you read all the series. I know I'm going to be reading the 5th book when it comes out in October, hopefully this year. And if you have any comments or questions, or, if you read the book and you wanted to share your thoughts, I'd be happy to hear them down in the comments. Please let me know what you think if you do read them. So I hope you really enjoy this book, and I will see you in class. Bye!